This is Solside Up. I'm your host, Sol. Welcome to an hour of beautiful conversation. Open your heart and enjoy. All right, everybody. Hi, and welcome to Solside Up. Today, I am blessed to have with me my dear friend, Rick Levine. Hi, Rick. How's Seattle?
Well, I should say that I'm blessed to be here with my dear friend Sol. So, yeah. Seattle is springing. It's, the weather has been weird, but definitely there are signs of post-equinox everywhere, and it's a good time of year for me. It's my time of year since I'm in Aries.
Oh yeah, and happy birthday, man! Woohoo! Yeah. It's lovely. Well, it's spring here too, but we just had a bout of snow. So, and that's destined to happen. You know, each year, spring just pops out, sticks its nose out a little bit, and then all the little buds are just being like popping, and then comes another round of snow just to see if they are hard enough to endure. So I always feel a little sorry for the little buds, but that's Aries for you, that little bud, that's the spring. And well, I brought you on to talk about not just Aries, but Mars and Venus in particular, because we have such an interesting thing going on in the heavens today. It is a new moon. It's quite the new moon. It's conjunct.
Quite a new moon.
Yeah, it's quite the new moon. How did you feel this new moon for you?
Well, it's funny because I have 4 planets plus the North Node in Aries, and so this new moon was basically my chart in some ways, different planets, and often when the moon is in Aries or when there's a cluster of planets in Aries. It often feels like it's too much for me, and I go into some level of shutdown. I don't sleep a lot. I'm okay. Astrology affects everyone else. It doesn't affect me. That's what I'm kidding.
We're beyond it. Well, it was actually there was this woman, Guru Chidvilisananda. She runs this organization called Siddha Yoga, and I remember reading in a book like 20 years ago or something about the influence of the planets, and it is somewhat a esoteric kind of understanding that at one point in your personal evolution, the planets won't affect you anymore. And that's what she wrote about in her book. Like you reach that still point where you're not one with the movement of everything that goes on. But I guess that's not what you're talking about.
But what's interesting is that the church, the Catholic Church, nowhere in any of their material do they say astrology doesn't work. They only say, 1, don't do it, and 2, that if you accept Jesus Christ as your savior, then astrology doesn't affect you. Now, it's interesting because the Jews in the Talmud, which is the commentary on the Old Testament, the Old Testament of the Bible, the Torah, the Jews basically say astrology works for everyone except for the Jews. And there's a theme here that's really interesting. It's the same theme that you just described from your teacher, or from the yoga teacher, and that is that when we reach a certain state, or if we reach a certain state, we are not as impacted necessarily by the pushes and pulls of the tidal forces that affect the masses. Now, I'm not suggesting that I'm really beyond that at all. I was really being a bit facetious, but it's interesting that thread runs in very different sectors, and it kind of is the same thing.
Yeah, and it's absolutely. It's been on my mind for years. Actually, I remember taking a plane to South Africa some years ago, and I ran into this conversation. I had this incredible thing happening on the plane. Where pretty much everything, like I went into some small crisis because of coincidence, and then I'd been looking at my chart previously to the journey, and I was full of these post birth hormones, so I was a little volatile emotionally at that point. I wasn't quite stable, leaving my young little daughter at home, and I felt like I would be punished at some level, this punishment thing, like the sin and blah blah blah, because I left her for this journey to South Africa. I was just going to have fun, and she was 1.5 years old, and it like something inside felt wrong about that. And then I ran into this guy who was a practicing Muslim. He was a very interesting guy, and he was sitting right next to me on the plane. And I got a little worried, because he started praying and stuff. And I kind of interrupted him, and I said, I asked if he was okay. And he looked at me with compassion, and he said, yes, I'm fine. Thank you for caring. And then we had this conversation about religion and astrology, because we started talking. And he said, we don't practice astrology in Islam. And I said, I'm well aware of that. And I asked him, what was the reason for that? And he said, we want to trust God in every breath. And for me, that's been following me ever since, because for me, astrology is a great tool to gain understanding and to benefit, to make good choices, to not be part of the constant bipolarity of the rhythms that's going on. Yeah. To kind of like move towards that still point. But it really put me in an ethical kind of dilemma when it comes to practicing astrology in the world today, because sometimes I get the impression that people use astrology to control the future, or to.
I think they do. Or I think they use astrology to perpetuate the illusion that they're controlling the future.
Yeah.
But I totally believe that for me anyhow, astrology is part of my practice in trusting the divine proportion, the wisdom of God, whatever you want to call it. That astrology is not something to outsmart nature. It's something to be a part of the unfolding of the rhythms of God or nature. I find it intriguing that the Lord's Prayer, which is recited by many Christians on a daily basis, says it is done on earth as it is in heaven. And yet they go, but astrology is bullshit. Yeah. Wait a minute. You just said it's done on earth as it is in heaven. And that's all. And to me, that's all astrology really is that what's up there and what's down here is one and the same. It's just different reflections. Anyhow, we have Venus and Mars to talk about. Oh, no, so this new moon, let me say a quick word about this new moon, because there are these 5 planets in Aries. And sometimes and in fact, Eris is also right there, conjunct the new moon, right between new moon and the new moon and Venus. So it's very, very powerful. But sometimes we get micromanaging when we look at the specific degrees and the planets and whatever. And I just want to step back for a moment and just have everyone imagine or understand that for most of 2020, we were dealing with a pileup of heavyweight planets in Capricorn, that in the beginning of 2021 moved into Aquarius. Actually, that began in late December of 2020. But by the new moon in Aquarius, we had all these planets lined up in Aquarius, then in Pisces, and now we're experiencing that same condensation of energy, but in Aries. And it really is going to be fascinating, because this is setting up what we're going to see unfold over the next month or later in April. And that is as these planets move from Aries to Taurus, beginning with Venus. And I know that this is something that you said that we wanted to talk about today, and we don't have to talk about it fully yet, but I just want to point out in the flow of all this energy is that Venus is the first planet that moves into Taurus. And when it moves into Taurus, it's going to conjunct Uranus, which I know you want to talk about. But here's the thing. It doesn't just conjunct Uranus. It conjuncts Uranus and square Saturn. And so, and because it does that, and actually the moon is going to do that over the next couple of days, and then behind that Mercury is going to do the same thing, and then the sun is going to do the same thing. We have 4 planets that are going to conjunct Uranus and square Saturn, and what this does is this sets up a resonance to the vibration of Saturn squaring Uranus, which is the underpinning of the entire year 2021. And so although the aspect isn't exact at all in April and May, we're getting a resonance to the Saturn squaring Uranus by all the planets conjuncting Uranus, and then having to deal. They conjunct Uranus, they explode, they excite, they go wow, they do what they're going to do, and then they have to answer to Saturn. Uranus and then Saturn. And it's part of this process that is a larger process than the individual aspects. Just wanted to open with that little thought.
Oh, perfect. Absolutely. It's so important to have the bigger picture. And one planet you didn't describe, though, and I'm a big fan because I've been working so hard to put her into the planetary family and not just reduce her to an asteroid, and it's Ceres.
Yes.
We also have that. And that's, like the intro to this conversation was about letting go of control, or having that existential anxiety that underlies living on Earth. I mean, first of all, we don't know where we are. I mean, what is the universe anyway? And we're rolling around on a rock, basically somewhere in deep space. And it's natural that we have a certain existential angst with that. It's and everything, like, where are we? Where are we going? What's happening? What's going on with our society today? That's the Saturn Uranus imprint on 2021 is extremely interesting. I remember actually writing an article about Saturn in Aquarius, in particular for the CIA. They had this little ebook that came out, and I did the Saturn in Aquarius, and I couldn't help thinking about 1984 and all those things, because I read it as a young woman in my teens, and it made an impact on my mind. And checking into the charts of George Orwell, you could see that he's born with Saturn in Aquarius, and for me that was like, okay, makes sense. Like, this is a guy who goes out and basically tells us that we need less censorship in our societies, and we are being somewhat micromanaged for the time being by through this computer internet technology that we have.
And of course he foreshadowed in many ways
definitely
the whole concept of fake news.
Fake news.
That was Orwell. Good. Good is bad.
Good is bad. And it's so much. It's happening right now as we're speaking. So whatever Uranus is doing, Saturn is definitely going to micromanage some of that, those impulses. Now, I'm a big fan of Uranian energy. I'm being such a hardcore Aquarius woman, and I believe in the sovereignty of the individual, and that you shouldn't trap. Every unique human being should be honored. Like, we are all breathing sentient beings, and this process of individuation is something that I wanted to talk to you about, because, okay, we have this full picture, the Saturn-Uranus square is happening right now, and we don't have a lot of freedom yet. We have this COVID situation going on, and there's these restrictions that we got to, pay attention to all the time. How do you think that affects people's process of individuation? I have certain ideas about that, but you also said that, 2020 was a good year for you. You enjoyed staying in your cave, and you had a little bit of opportunity to kind of...
Well, I said my Cancer moon liked the isolation and so on. It's the first year in probably 45 years or so, that I haven't been on an airplane or on a long road trip or whatever. And so, and it would have been a good year, except it's hard to be sane in a world that's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so to say that I had a good year would be in overt denial of the fact that the planet is in somewhat of a free fall meltdown. Now, that meltdown may be overdue and it may be okay on some level, but on the egoic level, it's never okay to see things that you like or are attached to disintegrate or fall away. But this thing about individuation and Aquarius, I mean, first of all, we should comment that the actual word individuation was a word that came into being through Jung's analytical psychology, that the process of what we now call Jungian therapy is the process of individuation. And as astrologers, everyone's chart is different, and every planet in everyone's chart, every planet just simply wants a voice. This is what individuation really is. It's about not having blockages that stop a planet from expressing, from being seen, from being heard, from being a part of the expression of each individual. And the problem, though, with the concept of individuation is what happens when my individuation steps on yours. What happens when something that I do because it's part of my natural being in some ways creates an environment that prevents you or someone else or a lot of other people from being who they are? And there we step into tricky territory. And I find it very fascinating how over politicized, I was going to say, that process has been, but really how everything right now is over politicized, because no one says, I'm not going to obey the speed law because going 35 miles an hour is an infringement on my personal right of individuation, or the fact that the government wants me to stop for a red light at an intersection. That's just not right, because they have no right to stop me. And yet people are saying they have no right to tell me to wear a mask. Now, I find it, I'm not coming down on either side of the issue here. I'm just finding it absolutely fascinating how people's energies are so riled up with a Uranus, Saturn Uranus square. Saturn is the status quo. Uranus is the rebellion against the status quo. Saturn is the old, Uranus is the new. Saturn is the conservative, Uranus is the progressive. And somehow everything right now is reflecting back to these larger, more dynamic issues of the Saturn Uranus, which may or may not have anything to do with any one particular issue. I find it fascinating.
Well, the question is really, what is freedom versus responsibility? You know, as human beings, we are responsible. We are responsible. We have responsibility on one level, and my energy affects other people's energy. My expression affects other people's, like I have the power to make an impression. So when we understand the depth of our power, how we influence each other, actually, then we can take a responsibility for our actions in a more compassionate way. So that doesn't negate freedom. We have to redefine freedom. Like I've been thinking a lot about freedom, actually. One of my heroes, has always been Nelson Mandela. I followed his work since I was a kid. It always resonated with me. I'm like, oh, well, my goodness, wow, this person, like he's really something that inspires me. And I saw where he was sitting for 27 years on Robben Island in South Africa. And we had like a guided tour through the jail that is now a museum. And you saw where he sat, where he drank, where he went to the toilet, how they labored, and what he did on top of that, how he educated people inside the prison walls and how they all did it sneaking off, and he taught people to read and write and stuff like that. Now he came out a king.
Yeah.
And my little thought is that 99% of people who went into that prison would come quite broken out out of it.
Very broken.
Yeah, very broken. I mean, and understandably so. But he came out a king. You know, there was something he said about his oppressors. He said, when I understood that, you know, the jail manager was just a human being, I was free. You know, like I was free from the oppression. He could reach that point of compassion, and it was freedom within him. You know, it wasn't necessarily, it didn't have nothing to do with the outer circumstances. And that's, for me, is really like the opportunity that we have now, is to free ourselves from a world that we've been constantly trying to change all the time. Other people trying to change their minds, trying to move them instead of moving ourselves. You know, so this is always a challenge, because we live in a world that we constantly perceive as it needs fixing, like we need to change it. And there you have politics, like we have to do something all the time. We have to fix things.
It's a patriarchal disease.
Yeah, you know,
nature needs to be fixed because it's not right.
Exactly. In a way, yeah, absolutely. And, you know, as I saw this, you know, like the before we started, we talked a little bit about, you know, that one Saturn cycle before that started the internet, and how the globalization process has been, you know, like, boom, it's been going so quickly lately. It's like we're all into one big thing. If something happens in the Panama Channel or like the Suez Canal, as it did now, everybody knows in an instant. Did you hear what?
Everything is connected to everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're becoming one organism, and that organism is fatigued. It is burnt out, you know. The fires, you know, we've been running too hard, too quick, too much, too long. And I think people are generally quite tired.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think that there's another thing. Not only are we burnt out, and by the way, this really brings up a very fascinating thing. I don't know if you know much about the life and work of Marshall McLuhan, who was in the late 1960s and into the 70s, was considered to be a media guru. And he coined the word, I mean, he wrote a book called The Medium is the Massage, and from that came The Medium is the Message. It was a Joycean pun. He wrote a book called War and Peace in the Global Village. He coined the term global village. And he also said that technologies were externalizations of human functions. And when we externalized the function and then used it for the social function, that we had this kind of pain of loss. And like a house is an externalization of our skin, or the printing press is an externalization of using the eye to read, and that the computer was the externalization of the human brain.
Oh yeah,
and that with the advent of the World Wide Web, which was coming into being really right at the time of his passing, that he said that what we've done with all of the digital and electronic media is that we've externalized our nervous system, meaning that we have now humans have an exo-nervous system.
Yeah. Wow.
Here's the thing: is what you said is absolutely correct. That we have this exo-nervous system, and it's tired, it's overrun, it's burnt out. It carries so much noise and static and information on a minute to minute, second to second basis. We're all burnt out. But not only is this exo-nervous system burnt out, it's also schizophrenic. And I don't mean that in a judgment. What I mean is that from a psychological standpoint, a neurosis can be managed by communication, by conversation, by uncovering the untruth and retelling the story. A neurosis can be managed. Schizophrenia, on the other hand, the more you communicate the two sides of the schizophrenic issue, the further apart they get. They do not share the same reality, and communication does not resolve the difference. And that's where we as a culture are right now, again, exacerbated by the Saturn Uranus square. But we're schizophrenic. You put two people together, I don't care what the issue is. That could be COVID, it could be masks, it could be Brexit, it could be Trump, it could be the royal family, it could be Hong Kong, whatever political, whatever issues you want. It could be the environment, global warming. And you take people at opposite ends of the spectrum on that discussion, and the more they talk, the further apart they get. And this is where Uranus comes in, because Uranus only has one job. Uranus's resume says job function: the instantaneous resolution of irresolvable opposites. And then you say, well, how can irresolvable opposites be resolved? That's Uranus's job. That's the quantum paradoxical impossibility. When there's no resolution and the tension gets so strong that the lightning strikes. That's Uranus. In that one moment, it takes whatever irresolvable tension there was and it resolves it. And that's why these times are so crazy.
I agree with you completely. It's like a separatist kind of energy that's breaking us apart. And how do we resolve this? These paradoxes. I think the one thing that really strikes me with the story with Nelson Mandela is that he managed to solve something that felt completely impossible to solve.
And his Uranus, as you probably know, was not only square he had a Uranus in Aquarius, and his Uranus was square a Scorpio moon, but it was also trine Venus and Venus conjunct Vesta. His Uranus was very closely trine Vesta, and here we get that whole element of the service, of the showing up with the light and the love, that Venus Vesta conjunction that never ever gave up. It never quit, even after 27 years, a Saturn cycle, not unlike Galileo, who spent a Saturn cycle under house arrest. Certainly not comparing the two, but there certainly was a similarity of having to go through an entire Saturn cycle of being silenced and then coming through and becoming a king, an icon, and in a way that there was no way that the church was ever going to allow the heresy of the sun becoming the center, replacing Earth as the center. And by the same token, there was no way that the Black indigenous population of South Africa would ever be allowed to take any sort of control back. And both of those, in a swipe of Uranian lightning striking instantaneous poof, changed everything.
That's the I had to smile when you came in with details on the chart of Nelson Mandela. It's like this is how we talk when you just have it in your mind. It's like the experience of sitting with these charts. It's really good, because then you see and you can understand and you can read the charts of those who went before us and learn something about how they solved their issues with these planets and how they what we tune into. So basically, and I know I sit with a lot of privilege in my world. I constantly give gratitude to my privilege. Of course, privilege is relative to the local community that you live in, and there will always be differences within a community like that. I don't enjoy certain privileges that are very common in my society. For instance, I have a different kind of lifestyle and a different kind of life that makes me say goodbye to certain privileges. It's not that I don't have access to them, or maybe I don't. Maybe I have some karmic situation going on, so I don't get access to certain basic necessities, for instance. But for me, it's always been a matter of, it's not what happens to you, it's how you respond to it that's important in the long run. Because I think, there's one person who really, really inspires me, and it's Dave Chappelle. You've heard of him, the stand-up comedian? Yeah. Sure. There's this great interview with him, and where he says something that he says, we need more redemption. We need redemption in our society. In other words, we need to be more forgiving with each other, to just to heal that schizophrenia. And that's when we come into these Mars Venus things, because then it's all personal for us, then it gets personal, it gets my values, my will, I want it my way. Mars is a separatist energy. It doesn't really obey always the instruction from the soul, if you like, from the higher self. It tends to go off and say, but I don't want to, I want it my way,
Well, that's part of the illusion of individuation, of thinking that my way is the right way.
Well, I think, at one point as well, when you have a certain kind of imprisonment of the physical body, like in the case of Galileo and Mandela, it certainly starts to refine the energies that wants to go around and just conquer the world. There's some sort of imperialistic kind of vibe to Mars. It's just like, I came, I saw, I conquered. It's a very Martian thing. Rome in itself was, well, according to myth, Romulus and Remus, they were the offspring of Mars, and it's built on Martian principles, basically. And Athena, and I'm sorry. And then I don't know what Athena did there, but let's bring her in. But anyway, so this kind of, like, I've been thinking a lot about that.
She tried to keep the guys on human.
I tried to.
She tried to keep the Martian guys a little bit human.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, need to do that work. Absolutely. She did. I didn't know that. That's interesting. Yeah. Anyway, this imperialism that is Martian impulse, and combined with a little bit of Jupiter, of course, is very much something that I think a lot of people are feeling that they're missing out of for the time being. We don't get to use our Marses the way that we were, normally would do. We don't get to, have as much. Well, if you're single, get out and have, get laid, for instance. People, their sexual lives have changed. Their sexuality, for a lot of people who are not in steady relationships, are basically challenged. And our capacity to go out and just do whatever we want, go to the pub or go to the cinema or go, just be free to move around, has been greatly kind of diminished. And it's almost like a feeling of being a little bit imprisoned. For some people it's good. Like, I've been thinking, what signs do best in quarantine? And I'm definitely, Cancer is way up there, and Taurus as well. And I'm sure Pisces is doing fine. I've been okay. I have Mars in Taurus, so I can sit for a long time in one spot.
Yeah, I think basically the water and earth signs do better in that situation than the fire and air signs. But I think what you're saying about Mars is very true. And I think that there is a bit of what's the right word here, where it's almost like there's been a mass castration of sorts. Because it's like Mars has been made impotent because there are no, it can't go out and conquer. It can't go out and rape and pillage and conquer new worlds. And I mean, I say that, not that one should joke about that, but that energy of Mars going out and into new territory and establishing itself and creating boundaries that it then defends. And it turns out that a lot of what's really been going on with this whole, COVID process is that the Saturn Pluto, which in many ways I mean, COVID really came into being on the weekend of
Oh,
the Saturn
definitely.
Pluto conjunction, was when the first recorded case and when the genome was actually published by the Wuhan lab. That was on January whatever it was, 12th of 2020, and we forget sometimes that Saturn and Pluto. Saturn is about boundary, and Pluto is about disintegration. It's about the deconstruction of boundary. And we often see Saturn Pluto conjunction oppositions in the mundane historical cycles as conflicts between boundaries, between religions, thought processes, nation states. We see that constant shuffling of what happens when boundaries become tested, broke through, and then redefined. And yet a pandemic like COVID is basically an infringement of Saturn. It's our boundaries began to disintegrate, but it wasn't a boundary that we could recreate by building a wall, whether it was a wall around our home or a wall between two countries, because the boundary was microscopic invaders that were impinging on us. But again, how do we respond? We respond to that using Mars, because Mars is the way we defend our boundaries. So we go into action and we create tools and weapons to in some way fight off the invasion. And yet the general populace is kind of left with, Mars has nowhere to go. How am I a human? How am I a man or a person if my Mars doesn't have something to engage in?
It is so interesting because, like Saturn Pluto was beginning the First World War. There was a perfect conjunction between Saturn and Pluto for the beginning of the First World War.
Within a week. It was August.
Within a week.
When the Duke of Serbia, whoever, Ferdinand, was assassinated, that was like 6 days away from the exact Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And there's a lot of evidence that says that the Spanish flu, which really came into its height around the Uranus, Saturn-Uranus square in 1918, that there's evidence that the actual Spanish flu was first diagnosed in the laboratory actually back around 1914 in the United States, in fact, and that it was probably World War I that spread that around the world so fast, because until that time, an epidemic spread like Black Plague, which was also a Saturn-Pluto conjunction in what the date was, I think 1354, 1454, I can't remember. But the height of the Black Death in Western Europe was also the year of a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. But then plagues would spread by a ship coming from one side of the world to the other. And it had to be transmitted person by person by person. Whereas now we have airplanes that in a matter of 2 hours can send a microbe around the planet and stir things up so fast that we don't have the control that we thought we once did. Again, it's about our boundaries being tested and Mars being employed to fight this enemy. How do you fight it? It's microbial, it's invisible. We don't even know what it is. There are people who say there isn't even an enemy. How do you know?
Yeah, absolutely. But this is the first really global war we had. It is like, it's really like the global village is coughing. It's like, first of all, we were super exhausted before this started. Our immune systems were down. You can't just lead a stressful life year after year after year without paying the price for it. And I also think, it reflects back on the value system of society, of course. We about boundaries and such, and absolutely. What is Mars on a medical level? Mars on a medical level, you have a kind of defense mechanism happening. Right. It is the defense mechanism, the adrenaline, the cortisol, the adrenals, how we kind of are able to defend ourselves, you know. And when the fire principle is exhausted, this fire principle, you know, fire is, if you look at it energetically speaking, it's expressing itself from a midpoint. If you look at the sun, it's radiating from a center. You see this on the symbol of the sun as well. It's a circle with a dot in it. Yeah. So, and it's radiating, you know, you see it's just radiating. And if I was energy, let's just be a little, which I am. Yeah. Well, you too, sir. And, you know, like, and I'm radiating from the heart, you know, I'm radiating from me. I know who I am. I lead a life where I'm loyal to that. I don't transgress my own boundaries and do stuff that is not healthy for me just because somebody out there tells me to exhaust myself. That's when I'm starting to radiate from me, when I'm getting that expression internalized, like who am I? Basically, that's individuation for me. It's not about if I can do whatever I want to do. It's just who am I? And this is very at the depth of the Aries archetype, and actually also would be the work of Mars when it's operating from a soul level to create actions that is in accordance with the soul. And the soul is always love, so it would never be abusive to somebody else. And that's just a disintegration of the connection between the soul and the persona. When that happens, when you have to conquer everybody because you don't really have a connection on the inner levels, and it becomes a compensation. So for me, the immune system, when it works well, it radiates out. You know, you're not so sensitized, you're not so hypermagnetic. A lot of people talk today about being oversensitive, and, you know, they take in too much. I believe sensitivity is really important. If we want to become conscious of each other, we have to be sensitized to each other. We need sensitivity. It's part of how we touch and feel into the quality of life, how we can feel things, and that's important. But
too much sensitivity is lack of boundary.
Yes, exactly. And I think,
you know, it's interesting because there are practices that are yogic practices that kind of take the concept that sometimes what we do to strengthen our defense mechanisms, our immune system, our boundaries, is we build a wall.
Yeah, exactly.
But building a wall is not as effective as replenishing the center, because if the energy is radiating out, there's no need for that protective wall. Something can't get in unless it's invited, unless we allow it in, you know, because it takes that sense of vulnerability for something to get in. And I find it very interesting as a metaphor that many countries, certainly the United States, mostly Western medicine as a whole, invests hundreds of millions, maybe billions of dollars on developing a weapon to strengthen the external wall, rather than spending maybe a few $100 million and giving people tools to strengthen their own immune systems, whether it's through, you know, andrographis, vitamin C, echinacea, elderberry, zinc, whatever those tools are that might strengthen an immune system. No, we don't go there. Instead, we want to build a wall out here to basically, you know, to take the weakened immune systems and protect them rather than to strengthen an immune system.
Yeah. And that's when you get into the whole healing aspect of it, which is not to be talked about because it's almost like swearing in church to say these things. We don't have trust in our own immunity systems. And it's understandable because not everybody's immune system operates well, you know, like
and of course, and although we can't say it, I'll say it. It's because we have a system that has no health care. It has sick maintenance. And
sick maintenance. That's a good word.
Well, it's a sick maintenance system that makes money. It's like in the United States in particular, you know, it's like one of the three most profitable industries in the country. You know, it's probably the gas oil industry, the defense industry, and the pharmaceutical industrial medical complex. And, you know, and so there is a strong resistance to the idea of people getting healthy. If people were encouraged to get healthy, it would mean taking down the entire agribusiness structure, which is feeding us poisoned food, which is weakening our immune systems, which is why we have to invest so much money in these artificial walls called vaccines or experimental biological techniques or whatever. And I'm not saying that those shouldn't be used. That's a separate discussion. I'm just saying that's why we have to employ them, because we're basically sick.
Oh my God, this is like going into the loophole, like I'm really, this is my favorite theme these days, because it has so many aspects to it. There are always
but it's all Saturn square Uranus.
Absolutely. I was thinking about that. The gods are fighting again. Sometimes I get these images in my mind, because if you read a little bit of mythology, you know that, my goodness, these guys are fighting a lot, and they're castrating each other and throwing the testicles into the sea and whatnot. They're just, and then he eats his children, and then, then they slay their own father. And it's like, it's a constant kind of evolution happening, but it's coming through.
Oh, I thought you were talking about my childhood.
What, you're born with some sort of Saturn Uranus square? No, yeah. But the thing is, sometimes I just get these perspectives that kind of, it's entertaining to understand the world through the eyes of the old Greeks, for instance. They saw the battle of the energies coming in, the battle of the different understandings. And when we talk about these things, we talk about how science, for instance, Prometheus is very often associated into the sign of Aquarius. I don't know, you read Tarnus's work on it. Yes. And he associates Prometheus into the Uranian quality, which makes sense, because Prometheus, he took the fire from the god and gave it to humanity and was punished for eternity, for doing so, because the gods meant that you can't do that. They don't know how to handle fire. And in this sense, fire is power. It's kind of...
in the modern day and age, that whole Promethean concept is not just fire as it was maybe 3,000
back in the days ago. Yeah.
But it's pharmaceutical use of expanding the mind. It's technology, it's digital interface into biology. It's all of these biohacking things that in some ways are creating the illusion that humans are divine. And in some ways we are, but we don't exercise divinity without the consciousness of the gods. And therefore we end up screwing things up. We end up having what we call science is really technology, because modern scientists largely are engineers and technologists. They don't understand how everything relates to everything else.
Well, cue Chiron. That's when we start thinking about the centaurs. Right. We're like, dude, you're half animal, half human. Remember that you're only a semi-god.
Right. We need the music now for Chiron to kind of come up. And Chiron to enter stage left. And,
yeah.
Plunk on his hoofs, with his ruler and his scribe, kind of saying, I need to teach you guys something.
Yes.
People forget that Chiron wasn't just the wounded.
No, he was
healer,
a teacher.
And he was actually the original teacher.
And teacher of who? Of heroes.
Asclepius.
Heroes. And what is a hero? A friend of mine from Greece said a hero is just a child. It's a child in the making. She said that in Greece we see the hero as a child.
Interesting.
And I'm like, wow, what? And I let that absorb into my brain, and it kept stirring in my mind for a little while. And I saw what she meant, because you have the hamartia, the flaw of the hero. The hero is flawed. Achilles, he had his weak spots. Hercules had to go through all his 12 labors in order to heal his flaws. He went through a sort of initiation, which you can see in the works of Campbell when he writes about the hero's journey. There's like you're being put on a test so that you can you can evolve from that childlike creature, I just want to take over the world because I want to be somebody, and then become a mature human being who are well aware of their limitations. Listen, Icarus, you can't fly too close to the sun nor too close to the water. This is dangerous. You have to find the middle path.
So I've told this story many times, but about close to 30 years ago, Demetra George was staying at my house, and she said, "Can I? Would you like me to read your chart?" And I said, "Of course."
Of course.
And we sat at my dining room table, and she told me the story of Daedalus and Icarus, and it was the most memorable reading. That was the entire reading, and it turns out, and I didn't know that then, but my sun is in Aries and my moon is in Cancer, and they are partile square. And I have Daedalus conjunct my Aries sun and Icarus conjunct my Aries moon.
No.
So I have a Daedalus Icarus square. And she told me the story of Daedalus and Icarus, which I kind of half remembered, from my readings in mythology. But all of a sudden I realized, holy crap, this is my story. And so you mentioned, Icarus flying, too close to the sun and the wax on the wings melting, then going too close to the ocean, getting the overweight of the water spray and moisture, and the energy of the youth. His father Daedalus cautioned him from going too close to the sun or too close to the water, and he was having this roller coaster ride on those wings, and man, nothing was going to stop him, and it cost him his life. Matter of fact, that reading, Demetra says to me, she goes, you're so I look at your chart and I see this Icarus Daedalus square. She says, you're a meditation, you're a biker meditator. I go,
a biker meditator.
What the hell is that? She goes, well, it's like Hell's Angels for a yogi, it's like you're the meditator who's going to go too close to the sun and too close to the water.
Excellent. Anyhow,
but yeah, the whole Greek mythology, I think, is very significant and important in all of this. But let's bring this back to the new moon and coming up full moon. I mean, we've just had this incredible, Aries new moon with Chiron, Mercury, Ceres, Sun, Moon, Eris, Venus, all stuffed in 30 degrees. And, and this is really just the setup. This is like really the first moment of spring, even though the equinox, was almost 2 weeks.
And it's the first new moon in the astrological year. Like we start up with Aries, so it's really a seeding point. And the thing why I wanted to bring in this kind of like understanding of the internalized who am I process, because you've seen Joseph Campbell's chart. He's a full-on Aries. He spent his life looking for himself through all these mythologies and stories, and he traveled the world and had
you know what the first book was that he wrote? This totally I know of Joseph Campbell through the Myth and Symbols, through the hero's journey, through his work at Columbia University, but about 10 years ago or so, I decided that it was time for me to bite the bullet and try to wade my way through James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake, which is an impossible book. No one really reads it. And I bought a copy of the book because several people whose work I totally respected used James Joyce in their work and quoted him and his puns and so on. Marshall McLuhan being a major James Joyce scholar. And I spent about a week or two trying to read the book and really couldn't make any sense out of it at all, although I felt like it was fascinating. So I went to Amazon.com and I found a book called A Skeleton Key to Understanding Finnegan's Wake.
Oh, you did like
that's the book. That's the book that I need. It was written in 1934 or 39. I can't remember now.
And that was Campbell.
By Joseph Campbell.
Yeah. And
so Joseph Campbell was like one of the three people on the planet who was intelligent enough and knew enough to decipher the complexity of this guy's 10-year rambling of puns in 11 languages and, you know, I mean, just impossible stuff. And yeah, so I'm very familiar with Joseph Campbell and his work and his contributions for sure.
Yeah, because I think, you know, like now that we have this thing where our Mars is castrated in a way, we can't run around and spend energy on what we normally used to do. I think we're kind of digging deeper to see who we really are, you know, it's know thyself kind of thing. And to also to again back to the individuation, you know, the process of learning how to not align with the unhealthy values of the societies that we built. The revolution has to happen one by one, you see, you know, like if there's no personal change or personal authority in your life, like, no, I don't want to do that. That's not healthy for me. I don't want to compromise my health. I don't want to do something that exhausts me, because then I know I have to pay the price for it. And we have had, like, I've seen it with clients and stuff, like an epidemics of burnt out syndromes. You have this ME going crazy these days. I have clients who have children who are like 14, 15 who are burnt out. They haven't even gotten started. It's like, what is happening? And of course, you know, I remember Maurice took us to Hawaii, Maurice Fernandez, and we had this kahuna coming in, and she told us the story about the white man coming to Hawaii. And she said, we couldn't understand what they were doing. They were out in the fields at noon. Who does that? It's so hot. It's not good for your bodies. We were under the trees in the shade, just chilling and waiting for nature to show us that now's the time to work, but don't go there. You're going to get scorched. And that's, you know, the problem with the so-called patriarchy. It's just this gold. It's not organic enough, you know, it's not listening to the body. And I think, you know, that's when we really start seeing an interesting individuation process, or as the Taurus, Krishnamurti would say, it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. Now he saw that, you know, like Taurus and Aries, it's the beginning.
That's what I said at the beginning, you know.
Yeah, it's the beginning.
Maybe it was before we started recording, but, you know, saying that you're doing well at this time of the craziness is to say that is it sane to be sane and in the same
exactly. Yeah. It's hard to be sane right now. And this is something, you know, like, that's why I'm talking about this perfect immunity. That also was something that Jesus, you know, you mentioned Jesus earlier, you know, like I've been pretty inspired by the story of Jesus. You know, it's a very, very interesting story. If you look deeper into it, you see that you can be part of this world, but not of this world. This is something that comes through. And for me, it was like this yogic understanding of perfect immunity, where your principles of radiation, or as you said, your centers are starting to work again. So you become, your immune system is starting to work again. But then again, we have the genetic or karmic components. And this, I guess, is the ethical dilemma with our powers of science, because are we just going to let people die? You know, that's not happening either. You know, like, no matter how old they are, you know, sometimes, you know, the whole thing about death has come up as a little bit of a challenging thing, because we have that Prometheus science versus nature kind of thing going on right now. And what is the right thing to do? Are we here to cooperate with science, or is science something unnatural that we shouldn't be using? And of course, when you look at world history, evolution sort of brought it to us, and it came from nature. Science came from nature. We have to remember that it came from this thing. And what we use scientifically is also extracted from nature. So yes,
right. And there's a very deep and inherent fear of what's called transhumanism. I did a program on this last week on Astrology Hub. That's on YouTube. It's available. But this idea of transhumanism, that what happens when the human as we knew it becomes fully interfaced with technology, whether they are entheogenic substances, mind-enhancing substances, whether they are silicon or gallium arsenide, computer type devices that are interfaced with our, seeing, hearing, touching, muscles, so on, and even our brains. This is not science fiction anymore. In fact, some 40 years ago, I wrote this couplet that I think is more interesting today than it was when I wrote it 40 years ago. And it goes like this: science fiction has become science faction. But look at the robots, they have no reaction.
You can't really, you can't really take away the organic component.
But in fact, those lines are being blurred, and they're making people really, really freaked out as to where this is going. And I think a lot of the fundamentalist movement is a fear of what happens when science actually has a greater impact on life, so that we lose what we think of as human. This is Pluto's realm. You remember, Pluto's realm is to take those things away that we think are so important to our identity in order to bring us to the next level of reality, whether it's the butterfly to the caterpillar or the post-human to the human. And so we're in this very dynamic state right now where there's a huge amount of fear, and people want to go back to when they thought things were better, or when they thought things were safer. Whether they were better or safer or not, that doesn't matter.
My grandmother was born right after the First World War and had 2 kids during the Second World War. She survived the Depression and the Spanish flu and whatnot. And, that we've been here on Earth, and it's been pretty intense for quite a while. And it's hard. It's a hard life. The first rule of Buddhism is life is suffering. And then the second one is there's liberation from suffering. You just have to walk that path. Now that's hard because it requires personal effort. And I think, right now, this problem with loss and things not working out, and like when we're put under existential pressure, I guess that's when we see Mars react. And we will have, like the coming days, like we will have, the sun will cross Aries, the goddess of strife. It's quite feisty energies, and
cross Eris.
Aries, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And we still have a lot of work to do with that.
Ceres, who was the sister of Mars, of Aries.
And for me, that is a symbol of she's an anti-materialist in a way. Like you don't get to define yourself through materialism. It's like, I want authenticity. So many people have been amputated from compensating for a lack of self-worth. They cannot go out and conquer the world anymore. They have to, it's almost like being chronically ill. If you have a chronic disease, you don't get to fancy up wearing a dress of success, a material success, right? You have to redefine yourself from a spiritual level. And it's really a spiritualizing process. And that's Chiron in a nutshell. Like spiritual redemption is the key word for Chiron. Being embodied is, and like having to survive in a society that's basically valuing human beings as assets. It's becoming quite an important thing as we're being taken over by robotics more and more and more, that we actually do this Renaissance work and define ourselves a little bit more spiritually speaking. And I think, that's the hidden gift of this particular new moon, as Venus, Pluto squares each other, and maybe there's some loss of some, as you said, Pluto takes away the thing that we don't need anymore, but we think we need it,
It's the thing that we identify. It can be the thing that we identify with more than anything. That's what Pluto goes for. Pluto goes for the jugular vein. It goes for the thing that it thinks is that we think is the most important.
Yeah.
That's the thing that Pluto wants to take away to make sure that we know that we can exist without it.
Yeah, Pluto, the end of codependency and compensation. You just gotta do a deeper work. Yeah, definitely. So, but I think that Martian challenge is what we're dealing with now. When you see it on the internet as well, that's the schizophrenic component where the cells in the body are just constantly fighting each other. And right now it's pretty intense because, you have the Mars Neptune square and the whole mutability. I mean, definitely COVID is a mutable thing. It's dissolving something for us, whether we like it or not. And I think
also adapting and changing as we speak.
Yeah, we have to. It's like we just have to.
I'm saying it is.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
The big fear now is that we've solved it, but it's now morphed into something else.
Yes. Well, welcome to reality. It's like this is the reality. Yeah, welcome.
How long do we go? We've been on an hour.
No, we're gonna wrap it up, and that's why I just wanted to ground this spaceship that you and me can go on with something.
We can do that.
We can do that. We've done it before. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, really? Associations going crazy. That's why I enjoy sitting with you, Rick. It's such an honor that you wanted to come and hang with me. I'm like, yay, Rick is coming. So yeah, but I'm thrilled about this Venus-Uranus conjunction that's going to finish up. That's coming in between the full moon and this one. And
I'm not trying to take your thrill away. I'm only trying to remind you that the Venus-Uranus conjunction is followed within a couple of days by a Venus square Saturn.
Yes.
That's all.
That's all.
That we don't get. And Uranus, normally Venus loves being in Taurus. I mean, it's her home sign. It's her primary. Venus is one of those wealthy planets that has, two luxurious homes. Taurus and Libra. But her primary home is Taurus. And yet, as much as she loves being home, she's got a little bit of an anticipation thing going in her scheduled meeting with Uranus, because Uranus is not thrilled by being in Taurus. Look, Uranus is change, and Taurus does not like change. Taurus will change when it has to. And that Uranus and Taurus is great changes, but less frequent than, let's say, when Uranus was in Aries, change could happen minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day. And it wasn't that we didn't notice it. It was just that because it was fiery and fluid in that way. But Uranus and Taurus is like, it wants granite to move. And granite only moves when the earth quakes. And so Venus lining up with Uranus can be very exciting, but it's also a little bit unnerving for Venus, even though normally she might like that connection with Uranus because she's freed from her karmic crap. She gets to just be, in her sensuality and in her enjoyment without having to follow any of the rules. But in Taurus, there's a bit of an oddity here, especially because it's followed by that square to Saturn. So my thought is, and I'm not down on this at all, I'm just saying that that as we explode into the excitement and the anticipation of the potential of that Venus conjunct Uranus, that it will be followed by a pulling it back just enough to make it last rather than just dissipating away.
Well, we'll see. Like for me, like I think, it will be a little bit of a grounded experience as well, just getting Venus over into Taurus and Mars into I mean,
Mars into Cancer for sure.
And so we're just gonna land a little bit, even though it's not quite the landing that we thought it would be because of the outer planets are playing in on these two players right now. Both Pluto to Mars, and then a little later though, and then Uranus to Venus. But I think the opening up of the more feminine, organic, natural values is something of a slow going, moving process happening in humanity right now. So that's what I'm hoping for, like in that sense, like dematerializing a little bit, like just letting go of everything that wants to define life in terms of material values. Like there are other values to be found, and whether we like it or not, I think we are now forced to find them, even though there's resistance. We want to go back, as you said. So that's what, like I think, the overall theme here with the Saturn Uranus and things moving very quickly and then being held back again, to see if it's, we have to test out things to see if it's worthy to the test of time, which is very important for Saturn. But it feels like we are headed somewhere into a territory where we are releasing a little bit of maybe old concepts of what it means to be a human being.
I hope so.
I hope so too, because that would be so healthy.
I mean, it's due, and
yeah, it is due.
Obviously, the current self-perception of humanity is not working.
Yeah, that's true. I think definitely we see this global disease as a symptom of something that is underlying that we need to kind of get a little bit of understanding about. And I guess that's why we are privileged, my friend, because we are astrologers and we are here to communicate that. And I think we did that.
Good.
Yeah. So anything you want to say, where can people, people know you. I know you're like super.
Best place to find me these days is on I write a daily, it's kind of like a daily, people think it's a daily horoscope, but it's really a daily astrological blog. And I call it the Daily Planet Pulse. And it's every day. It's on Instagram. It's also on Facebook and Twitter. But the easiest place to find it is Instagram. And the account is Rick Levine Astrologer, all one word, Rick Levine Astrologer. And every day I post a graphic and a short one line or few word, kind of saying for what it is that's going on. And then a couple, maybe 200 words or so of text beneath that that really goes into one aspect of whatever the main energy is for the day. I don't do it by sign. I just kind of, like I say, it's more like a short blog every day. And that is on Instagram, Rick Levine Astrologer.
I will have your links underneath the video. So, and other than that, I just have to say Happy New Moon.
Happy Aries new moon.
Thank you.
It's the only real new moon because
it's the realest new moon. I'm so glad you came.
But I am Aries biased.
Yeah. Well, I am too. Both my parents are Aries. I adore Aries. Some of my greatest teachers have been Aries, so I'm a big fan of Aries. I'm a big fan of fire. You probably saw that. Okay. All right, Rick. Thank you very, very much for coming. I'm so glad you did.
And thank you very much for this conversation. I think that it's an important conversation to have and to keep going.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
All right.